Spiritually Young here. I want to talk about writing today. As most of you know, if you've been watching any of my videos, I am a published writer. I've written and published several poetry books as well as suspense romance novels. A lot of people have been in my Facebook inbox asking me questions like, well, how do you become a writer? How do you write a book? Um, and I thought instead of constantly responding to those messages, I could do a video and give people some tips and pretty much just let people know what my process is. And I will start out by saying my process isn't a process that's going to work for everybody. Everybody has to find their own niche. You find what works for you and go with that. Um, first, my first tip in writing, whether I'm writing poetry or novels, notebook. This is a writer's best friend. Pick you up a notebook anywhere, Family Dollar, Office Depot, Walgreens, Dollar General. You can buy a notebook anywhere, Hobby Lobby. I do keep a notebook on me. I carry one to work. Right now I'm working from home because of COVID, but when I worked in the office, I carried a notebook to work with me every day. I keep a notebook and an ink pen in my car. When I don't have a notebook with me, I use the notes section in my phone. Keep a notebook. My second tip is when an idea hits you, write it down right away. Don't wait until later and say, I'll remember it, I'll write it down later. You'll always forget. If I wake up at 2 in the morning with a writing idea, which I have, and I will grab my notebook off of my nightstand or my dresser and I'll scribble and hope and pray that's legible by morning. But I will scribble that idea out. There have been times I've woken up and I've dreamt of a poem or something, and I'll scribble that down and try to make sense of it the next morning, and it turns into a poem. Always write your ideas down, keep a notebook with you. Write things down immediately so you won't forget them later. Another thing that I do, again, is keep notes in my notes section on my phone. And tip number 3 is when you keep electronic notes, don't just store them in that one place. Whenever I write notes in my notes section in my phone, I email those notes to my email address. That way, if something happens to my phone, I still have those notes somewhere else. They're still stored somewhere else. I can go and pull them up and still have those. So it won't be a loss. So let's get started. The one thing I do when I'm writing my novels is when I come up with a novel idea, I sit down and I jot down notes. I figure out, how am I going to begin this? Where is it going to go? Where would I like for it to go? So I build an outline. And just because you're building the outline doesn't mean you have to follow it to a T. Things change when you're writing. You can be on chapter 5 and look at your outline and go, I have another idea. Let me jot this down, rearrange that outline. So you don't have to go strictly by the outline, but an outline does help me figure out where I'm going to begin and where I'm going to go with that novel. Also, I write down my characters, give my characters names, and I write down who I want them to be personality wise. I write all of that down, And sometimes those things change as well, but you have an idea of who you want them to be, how their sense of humor is going to play into the novel, how their personality is going to play in the novel, how they're going to mesh with the other characters in your novel. So write all of that down. Get an outline together where you want your first chapter to begin, you know, and where you want it to go from there. Get your characters written up, figure out who they're going to be, how they're going to behave, you know, who your lead characters are going to be, and that gives you some place to start. So once I have my outline, I have my characters, their personalities, sense of humors, their swagger together, I know what I'm going for, then I start working on the introduction to that first chapter. How do I want to start this chapter? And one of the things I realized is that first page is what's going to pull your audience in. That first page can either break you or make you. That first page, your audience should be like, okay, what's on the second page? So figure out a way to introduce your audience to your novel in a way that's going to pull all of their attention in and make them want to continue reading. So start with a boom, okay? And again, these are just my tips, my ideas. This isn't how everyone writes. It's just what I do. So I figure out where I want my characters to be. And in that outline, you want to make sure you know where your novel is taking place. Where in this world, where do you want your novel to be taking place? In Kentucky, in Alabama, in Miami, you know, in Mexico, in Aruba. Where do you want this novel to take place? You know, and also do your research on wherever your novel is going to be taking place. If you live in Kentucky and you want your characters to reside in Mexico City, do your research on Mexico City. Figure out where everything is there so that in your novel there's some realness coming through as well. I also, when I'm writing, after I finish with one chapter, before I start on the next chapter, I proofread the first chapter. Make sure everything I've written is in an order that just flows. I don't want to write a chapter and go, "Ooh, that was good," and move on to the second chapter when I haven't proofed the first chapter. There may be something in your first chapter on page 10 that shouldn't be there. Maybe it works better in page 5, you know. And another thing that I've done when writing is to make sure that you're not doing a lot of repeating. I have done that. You know, we all make that mistake. When you're constantly repeating yourself. I did put out a novel, Ocean's View. It's part of a sequel. One of the things that someone who reviewed that novel told me was, "You've told us about how good looking this character is, how amazing and charismatic he is. You don't need to put that in every single chapter." You know, so I thought he's right. You know, if you get your point across in chapter 2, if you bring that character to life the right way, you don't have to continuously throughout your novel explain how amazing they are or how horrible they are. So don't do a lot of repeating when you're writing. The easiest thing for me is the proofing, because a lot of times you go back, you may be in chapter 5, you go back in chapter 1 and you go, huh, there's a lot I can add into this chapter. You know, never finish a chapter and think, it's done, it's over with. There's always improvement to be made while you're writing. Never ever go with your first draft. Never ever. I've made that mistake as well in the beginning. Never go with your first draft. Your first draft is just that. It's a first draft. It should never be your final product. After you finish your first draft, sit down and you read from the first page to the last page. It's your novel. If you don't want to read it, what does that tell you? So make sure it's something that you're going to want to go back and read. Okay, so start with page 1, go all the way to the last page and read it. Figure out while you're reading, is this what I want to put out? Is this story something that's going to captivate an audience? And once you do that, and while you're proofing, while you're reading, make changes, make improvements as you go, corrections as you go. Make sure that your sentence structure is where it's supposed to be. That's what your first draft is for. Now, your second draft. For me, sometimes my second draft is my final product. I'm sorry. You know, after you finish the first draft, you've read from page 1 to the very last page. You've made corrections. Make sure your sentence structure is right. Grammar, punctuation, all of that is on point. You move on to your second draft with all of your corrections. And that's when I do the spell check in Go 365 Word. I do the spell check. And also I did go over saving your notes in more than one place. I do save my novels in more than one place. I write in Word, and I always email a copy after I finish writing. If I write 2 paragraphs, I still email myself a copy of those changes. I save it to a flash drive, and I also save a copy to my computer. And a lot of people think that because you save a copy to your computer, all is well. Your computer could crash, and there goes your work. So if you have a copy emailed to yourself, voila. If you have a copy on your flash drive, voila. And don't just save to your flash drive, because if you lose that flash drive, your work is gone. So again, getting back to the corrections and revising of your book, after you've done the first set of revisions, that second set, you go in and you do spell checking just to make sure that you didn't miss anything with your eyes, because it's very easy to miss things. You go in with spell check, and don't automatically think spell check is always correct, because sometimes it isn't. When spell check says, okay, make this change, you read where it's wanting you to make that change and make a final decision on your own. Does that sound right, or does it not? And you make that change or not. I think I pretty much covered everything that I do. Again, purchase yourself a notebook, some ink pens. Carry your notebook around with you. See, I even have notes taped to the back of my notebook. Carry your notebook around with you. Jot down ideas as soon as they hit you. You know, a lot of people ask me, where do you get your ideas for writing from? Sometimes they come from conversations. You know, I have a lot of different associates, you know, whether it be people I work with, people I've worked with, family friends, a lot of people who have different types of jobs, work at the post office, work as police officers, attorneys, conversations with friends. You know, book ideas can come from those as well. You know, ideas come to life from any and every avenue. So I pick up things everywhere. I can have a conversation with someone and go, wow, that would make an amazing story. And if I put it together right, people will love that. So that's where I get a lot of my writing ideas from. And before I end here, I want to say, if you want to become a writer, don't worry about what's already out there. There is room for everyone. There are so many genres out there. You know, no matter what you write, there is room for you as a writer, as an author. Don't be discouraged. Don't think that because you don't write like Toni Morrison or Dean Koontz or Anne Rice that your writing is mediocre, because it isn't. Everyone has their own style. Be yourself. Write what you want to write, how you want to write it. Don't worry about writing like someone else. You'll never make it that way. Write the way that you want to write. But I hope my tips helped. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below, and I promise to get back with you as soon as possible. And I'm also going to post some of my writing, some of my books in the video. So if you want to check those out on Amazon or Barnes & Noble's website, you can feel free to do that. If you do that, please, after your purchase, after you receive your book and read it, please go back to Amazon or Barnes & Noble's websites and leave me a review. Reviews are a writer's lifeline. You know, that helps us to learn what we can improve on, and it also helps in where we're placed on bestsellers lists. So please, if you want to write, if you have that passion, just do it. Just do it. And please like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. Leave comments and questions at the bottom. Spiritually Young here. Peace and blessings, everyone.
My head is jaded, you're faded, 'cause things don't always go the way that you plan. You gotta choose whether to fall or to stand, to fight the love or to let go of your hand. And baby, I'm waiting. If we don't get this one try, let's get it right.